music. We'll tell you about it in a moment. Hello, I'm Charna Davis-Wiese, and welcome to UCF Profiles. Now, most of us who chose television as a career are proficient, if not fanatical, multitaskers. We can tell you one thing looking in the camera while a producer is giving us instructions in our ear and the camera operator is waving in the background telling us where to look next and how much time's left in the show. Well, today's guest puts even the most harried TV host to shame, and you're not going to believe how many interesting things this professor does. Meet Dr. Barry Maurer. I don't even know how to introduce you. English professor for cultural studies, musician, photographer, screenwriter, writer. Shall I continue? Father.
Oh, sure,
husband,
keep going.
Son.
Sounds great.
But I'm telling you, I just can't wait to talk about all the stuff that you do, and I don't even know where to start first. But I think because we heard your music, that's probably a good place to start. Claire's song.
Yeah.
Name for your wife.
Of course. Yeah.
That is very cool.
Claire is very sweet, and we were at a wedding one day, and she said, "You write all this music, but you don't write anything for me. Why don't you write me a song?" And right then and there, I made up that song and went into the studio and recorded it.
Now, in that case, it was easy. But
very easy.
But songwriting isn't always easy.
No. Sometimes it's not.
Multi-step process.
Yeah, and the process can work all kinds of different ways. For me, the process always involves listening to a lot of music and knowing what, just starting to sort out what I like. So when I was growing up in Minneapolis, I was really lucky because everyone around me was a musician and people would show me things. I went to the same high school that Prince went to.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and then I knew all these bands, the Jayhawks, Soul Asylum, Husker Du, and they would show me things and it percolated. Do
you remember the first instrument you picked up?
Well, yeah, when I was a little kid, I started on piano, then I picked up violin. It wasn't until I was around 20 that someone gave me a guitar and showed me a little bit.
How many years did you? I started on violin too in 5th grade.
Yeah.
How old were you when you started?
I was probably about that same age, yeah. And I was a disappointed musician because I heard classical music and I heard the best violinists in the world and I wanted to sound like that instantly.
And all you could think is, how do you hold your hand up? And boy, do my fingers hurt.
Yeah. So moving from just being a fumbling, incompetent player to wanting to sound like Jascha Heifetz, I had a huge gap in there and there was a lot of dissatisfaction. So what I learned was first to quit and then to think about what would satisfy me. And it turned out that just being sincere and intimate in the sound I was making was satisfying to me. And it didn't have to sound like Jascha Heifetz or these other musicians. It just had to satisfy me in some ways.
It had to have some meaning for you.
Right.
Now, in reading some of your works and some of your papers, one of the things I found so amazing is the study of the meaning of phrasing and the meaning of music. And you talked about Frank Sinatra and how he could say the same phrase over and over again and mean a different thing.
Right.
Knowing that intellectually as a professor and being a songwriter, does that make the process easier for you or more difficult?
Yeah, with Sinatra, it's the process was to figure out how he did it. And I'm not going to say I'm a singer like Sinatra. But what I figured out studying him was that he really used acting as his method, that it was all about finding the internal logic of the character that he was playing when he sang, and that the character had desires and conflicts and obstacles, and he was thinking through those as he sang, and that's what makes it make sense. So when you return to a phrase and it means something different the second time, it's because the character has already struggled the first time, and there's coming back to that phrase means something now in relation to the first time.
Do you think that's what people loved about him so much? Because, he probably would never get past Simon on American Idol these days.
No, and I'm, a little disappointed in the level of popular culture, as probably most professors are, but yeah, he really represented a high point in popular culture, extremely accomplished in many areas. Dancing, singing, acting, all kinds of things.
And did it with true passion,
right,
which is probably what made him the superstar, don't you think?
Absolutely. But then he was able to take all those different areas that he knew about. Dancing, you learn about timing. Acting, you learn about character. And putting those into singing, and then being able to convey one thing to all the other things. And that's kind of what I like to do with my work, is think about, well, what have I learned from one area that I can bring into another area?
And you know, you also talked about one of my favorites in the history of the world, Louis Armstrong.
Oh, yeah.
And he just had this infectious way that you just wanted to be with him and listen to him.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, he stood out above everyone else because he seemed to have so much fun with what he was doing. He taught us a lesson in how to live poetically, how to live with drama and passion, and I see that as incredibly valuable.
You've done 2 CDs, working on your 3rd.
Mm-hmm.
Now that must be almost like having children.
It is, and it's a long process. And actually, I think I've figured out that every project I do takes about 10 years.
That's all?
Yeah, well, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter, but on average 10 years. So it's that incubation process that has to keep going for a long, long time. And I usually don't push myself to finish things until they're ready. So, you know, I started writing songs back in the early 90s. I was a graduate student, and
Was this in Atlanta? Was this when you were in Atlanta?
This was
when you were
before
in the
that.
girl? Was that really a girl band?
I was in an all-girl band.
What was it called? Wait. Look Here, Sister?
That's right.
Oh, did you wear a wig? Were you in drag?
No. I was the token boy, you know.
You were the token guy. Okay.
Yeah, and they took me on because they wanted a violin, and then they found out I could sing.
And you could help them lift things.
I could help them lift. They were pretty strong. They could probably outlift me, but then, yeah, I came in with a song one day and said I wrote a song, and they said, let's hear it. I played it, and they said, wow, that's great. You need to keep writing songs. So I did, and I became more or less the co-leader of the band. There was one other songwriter, singer, so I kept writing, and I'm still writing today. And I think my songwriting's better today than it was. I still learn more about the process.
You've gotten amazing reviews. You've gotten wonderful reviews where somebody said that you could do something the way the Beatles could do, where it could be poignant and funny all at the same time. That must have made you really feel wonderful.
Of course.
So somebody, not only that it was something nice to say, but that they got you.
Uh-huh.
They understood.
Yeah. Well, you're always, whenever you're writing or performing, you're sort of imagining an audience that may or may not exist, and if they don't exist, you want to create them out of something, and you know, of course, the Beatles were huge because I listened to them as a kid, and that's what made me want to go into music.
And they're still popular so many years later. Mm-hmm. That's something my kid always says to me. Isn't it amazing? I listen to stuff that you were too young to listen to, that I was too young to listen to. What makes them a legend and what makes it carry on is probably the passion and the meaning. And it was more than just, I want to make $25 million and.
Oh, yeah. No, they still, you know, talk about how wonderful it was just to be able to quit their day jobs, and that was as far as they thought they'd ever get. And just to be able to make music as an end in itself was fantastic for them.
Was enough for them. Okay, let's move on to something else. How about this collection of found photographs? Is so cool. Who would have thought? Now, you just one day you came across a group of photographs laying in the street, or was it just you noticed it over time, they were all over the place, or how did the idea to pick up these photographs and put them together come to you?
It was just chance. I found a photograph one day in the street, and then I found another one the next day, and another one, and then I sometimes would find 3, 4.
Now these were of complete strangers.
Right.
They're photographs that were somehow thrown on the street, maybe like you said, the possibility they were evicted from where they were living.
Right, and sometimes I would find a whole collection, photo albums, just piles and piles of photographs. And I was able to do this because I had a dog, and you have to walk the dog. So I just developed an eye, and then I thought, the world is actually a strange place because it's giving me what I'm looking for. And I used to walk with friends, and they would say, I can't believe you found that. There would be a snowbank in a little corner of a photograph sticking out of it, and I would spot it and pull it out. And they'd say, I would have never seen that, but you did. So I began to think that the world is more mysterious than I can imagine. It's just giving me stuff.
You're also very detail-oriented. Let's pick, I'm going to pick this one up.
Okay.
This one was really
Okay.
kind of cool. And I'll hold it up just this way and we'll take a look at it. Raising dog instead of baby apostrophe S.
Yes.
So what can you infer from this? You never even know, can you?
Right. And I wrote an essay about this that got published in a scholarly journal. The questions I had, they started out sort of, I started out just enjoying them as a voyeur, right? As someone who
Right.
just took pleasure in seeing other
Kind
people.
of fun to pick this up and try to think about
Right.
what it's about.
And then I became a detective. I would start thinking about, well, who were these people and why were they taking these photos and how did they get lost? And then I started thinking of it as a kind of social science, like, okay, well, most of the photos I find are about families. How do these photos reflect how families work and how they think about themselves and how they want to portray themselves and what their values are? And then the more I learned about photography, and I became very interested in surrealism as a practice, as well as a sort of philosophy, the idea that meaning starts to break down at certain points and you become interested just in surfaces and details, and that fascinated me. So the essay I wrote was really about not so much the photographs, but what the photographs say about us looking at them.
Right. The viewer rather than the person actually in the photograph. I love
Right.
this one over here. And the detail that you picked out from this particular woman
Right.
is really cool.
This was a huge pile of photographs that I found of a family. I believe they were evicted. And this photograph is of a woman in her nightgown smoking a cigarette with a huge bottle of vodka in front of her.
Huge.
Huge. And she's got, on the wall, there's a clock that says it's about 4 o'clock. So I was wondering if it was 4 in the morning or 4 in the afternoon. And either way, it was bad. Right. And there's a picture of Jesus on the wall.
It was happy hour somewhere on the wall, right?
Happy
Jesus is on the wall.
So I'm thinking, what would Jesus think about this whole scene? What would she think about Jesus being on the wall?
And then you blew it up and you saw the little pirate hat in it as well. So there must have been a child around somewhere.
Possibly a child. Yeah, there were children in it. I could trace the whole family chronologically because the pictures went back 30 or 40 years. By this time, the children were grown up. So
now, once these become published and possibly and most likely on the internet, do you ever think you're going to find any of these people? Or have you found any of these people?
No, never. And the issue of people's privacy is something I take kind of seriously. And there is now a lot of interest in found photographs. There's a group actually just called Found, and they publish books of found photographs, and they have an internet site where they take submissions. But to me, they're kind of stuck on voyeurism. That's the only interest they really have in this. And I'm more interested in what it says about me. And I think that because primarily I'm doing research on me, that hopefully that's okay, And if people see that I use their photographs and they understand how I'm using them,
I don't think they'd mind. There lies the professor of cultural studies.
Yes.
We'll be right back. We'll talk about this more. We're talking with Dr. Barry Maurer, professor of everything. We're talking about his found photographs and a little bit more. We've got to share these and use them for the covers of your CDs. This one is a riot to me. And here's this man reading a joke book. But it's probably not a very good joke book.
He looks very serious in the picture.
He's not laughing.
No, he's not laughing. And he has some kind of serious looking art on the wall. And I wrote about this picture because I had been reading Freud, and Freud has an essay called Jokes and the Relation to the Unconscious. So
what would Freud say about this guy?
Well, yes, exactly.
And this was the first one you found. This is what started the whole found photograph.
Right. I lived about a block from a bar in Minneapolis, and I walked past the bar, and this picture was outside on the sidewalk.
It's got a pinhole in it. It's probably like somebody must have had it on the wall or something.
Could be, and it's got scratch marks on it because it was face down on the sidewalk, so it probably been stepped on.
And you used this for the cover of one of your CDs?
Yeah, the back cover here. It's on there.
That's great. And this one, do they do these anymore? I remember when I was a little girl, this is probably the most fun you could have.
Yeah, and
get these made.
And when kids are in there, it's the best because they make the most extreme faces they can. So.
I have made all of these faces on these, haven't you?
Yeah.
Oh, it's just wonderful. It's just such a great idea. And now to move to something, this is from the past, something into the future. And like my boss Jerry says, I am the goddess of this monument that you are proposing. The proposal of the monument to lost data. Oh my, it would have to be very large, I think.
It's going to keep growing, yes.
Let's talk about what that is.
Okay. Well, I got interested in monuments back when I was a graduate student and I was teaching, and I actually assigned my students a project. They had to start making monuments. I believe that monuments was a kind of writing, just like an essay is, and it has form. So you can learn it, and it's persuasive, so it's like learning in an argument class. You learn to persuade people. And I thought, I shouldn't give students a project that I'm not willing to do myself. And I wanted to make a monument to show that I could do it. And one day I came to work and the secretary said her hard drive crashed and she lost the department's records. And I said, okay, that's it. I've got my monument now. It's the monument to lost data. And everyone I've spoken to has lost data at some point. If they don't have a hard drive that they lost a photo album, they've lost something. So everyone can relate to this. So I had to do some research for the monument, and I read a book called The Future of the Past. And in the book it said that not just individual people lose data, but institutions and even nations lose huge amounts of data. It pointed to the National Archives and Records Administration in Washington, D.C., and they're tasked with storing all the data of government agencies, and it said that they are losing more data than they store. So I thought, well, this is a national problem, and if we can locate a monument in the National Archives and Records Administration, which is actually where they keep the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution and all these really important documents, which, by the way, those are being lost too.
Thank goodness they were on paper and not on a computer.
Yes, that's true, but they're disappearing.
Right.
I was there a couple of years ago, and they're so faded that you can barely read them. So data, just like anything else, it disappears over time.
And people have varying reactions to it. It's actually almost a grief process.
It is. That's what it's designed to do. It's designed to really take people's grief and direct it in a certain way, which I'm thinking it should be towards a collective kind of grief, because we do that already around certain things. We do that around war deaths, for example. The nation as a whole mourns the dead of World War II. We build a monument to that. There are other kinds of loss that we don't recognize as collective. Everybody suffers in private. But if we realize that we're all in it together, that everyone's lost data, and that it's a result, I argue in my essay for this, that it's a result of progress, that it's precisely because we're moving to electronic technologies that we're losing so much data, because they're a lot more fragile, there's a lot more data to be lost, and that we're so much more dependent on data than we used to be, that the effects of losing it are increased. So.
And it's a well-known problem, because aren't there companies that actually that retrieve data? Don't they actually have therapists on board?
Yes, this is the case. If you have your hard drive crash, chances are 90% that they can recover everything on it if you bring it to these companies. But it will cost you more than it costs for the computer. It'll cost you 5 to 10 times more at least. And people go through a lot of stress in the process, so some of these companies have hired therapists to help you deal with the stress.
So it's something that if you shouldn't really feel badly that you really get so upset when you lose, and it spreads into other areas of your life too. possibly knowing that other people are going through this as well, you don't feel like such a silly person
No.
oh, why didn't I back up? Which is what I
No.
emailed to you. Why didn't I back it up?
Right. Well, it's like everything else. You know, your doctor tells you do this, and you know, some people do and some people don't. And even if you do, sometimes you still might have a health problem. You don't do it all. You don't do it as regularly as you should. Same thing's true of data. And you know, I thought about this in terms of how people normally discuss this. They always want to find a solution to a problem. When you talk about a problem, people want to say, we want to solve that problem. So we create whole industries that are designed to make backing up easier, make the equipment more reliable, and so on. And I say, that's great. I'm all in favor of that. But even if you did all those things, you would still have these problems. And what are we going to do with the remainder, the stuff that keeps falling through? Because we're a society that doesn't like loss. Nobody likes loss. But at the same time, we have to learn how to grieve and mourn. So I wanted to create something that would make it easy for people, and I created, I don't know, you want me to look at this picture?
Absolutely. Show this.
This is the National Archives and Records Administration Rotunda, and
with your little friends.
my friends, these are mushrooms. And this is a doctored picture. It's
The mushrooms really are not there.
They're not there
this
yet.
This is the photographer, Dr. Maurer.
I'm trying to convince, eventually I will propose this to the National Archives, and maybe they'll do it for a day or something, who knows. But I'd like them to put mushrooms in to represent the data loss that occurs there and across the nation. And this can also be something that can be put on the web and be a virtual monument where if you lose some data, you would get a mushroom. Mushrooms grow on decaying things and dead things, and they recycle the material of loss and turn it back into life, because then other things come along and eat the mushrooms, and it just, like, that's life.
So there may be some good that comes out of the lost documents that you have.
Exactly right, yeah. And there's good that comes out of mourning, because that's how societies pass their values on. They mourn the loss of those who came before, and by mourning them, they're remembering what was important about them.
The mushrooms, the actual monument, that would be maybe a temporary thing, or is there going to be a monument that is going to be permanent, or what's the next step for you?
There's a little bit of a paradox there, because the whole idea of lost data is that nothing's permanent. So to have a monument is to sort of say
put
it's
a real
permanent.
mushroom.
Yeah.
See what happens.
Yeah. Well, the idea is still being developed, and what I'm looking for is a group of artists and a group of maybe institutions like libraries and archives and things like that that want to make this a reality, and then we'll figure out exactly how people would contribute something of their own.
Was there a moment, I always ask this in every show, was there ever a moment in your life when you realized this is really what I want to do? But you remind me, in some ways I can really relate to you, because I do so many different things that aren't even the least bit related. At least yours are related. Was there ever a point where you said, yeah, I want to do this, I want to do this? Did you ever have what I call the aha moment in your life? Yeah,
absolutely. I have to say I went through a period of extreme dissatisfaction with just the world around me. I would have to say that things weren't the way I wanted them to be. I wasn't happy with, you know, I wanted more meaning. I wanted to be able to relate to people differently, and I wanted beauty and truth, all those great things. And I just did what other people do in that situation, explore. So I joined a dance company, I played in an orchestra, I tutored people learning English, I worked in a artist's book company making handmade books. I worked in a film company making documentary films, and I just continued, like, you know, every couple months I would add a new thing. I didn't see how any of it fit together. Then when I went to graduate school, my first day of class, I learned about cultural studies and how it was really tying together all these things, and I said, aha, that's it. All these things make sense together, and I can understand them in relationship to language and technology and meaning.
And you could all bring it under one big umbrella. My last question to you, where can people find out how to buy these fabulous CDs?
You can go online, you can go to Amazon, or you can go to CD Baby and just type in my name and you will find the CDs.
There you go. Barry Maurer, thank you so much for joining us. The next time you're on, who knows how filled up this desk is going to be.
That's right. We'll just have a truck dump it.
Sounds good. Thanks for joining us.
Okay.
I'm Charna Davis-Wiese. Thank you for joining us, and we'll see you again next time.